The ocean was a constant in Clara's life. Growing up in the coastal town of Blackwater Bay, she found solace in the rhythmic crash of waves, the salty tang in the air, and the endless stretch of horizon. But Blackwater Bay had its shadows, stories of shipwrecks, disappearances, and the drowned ones, restless souls said to haunt the waters near Raven's Cove. Clara never believed the tales. She was too practical for ghost stories. Until the summer she returned home. Clara, her younger brother Jake, and 3 of their closest friends decided to spend a weekend camping near Raven's Cove. It was a secluded spot with white sands, towering cliffs, and a reputation for danger. The locals avoided it, citing treacherous tides and whispered legends. But for Clara and her friends, it was the perfect escape from reality. By the time the weekend was over, Clara would wish she'd never set foot on that cursed beach. The drive to Raven's Cove was uneventful, but the air seemed heavier as they approached. Clara sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window as Jake navigated the winding coastal road. Behind them, Mia, her best friend, was joking with Sam and Leo, the twins they'd known since childhood. "So what's the deal with this place again?" Leo asked, leaning forward. "Something about ghosts?" Mia snorted. "Supposedly, the drowned ones haunt the cove. They lure people into the water and drag them down. Typical spooky nonsense." Jake grinned. "You mean to tell me you're not scared, Mia? Not even a little?" "Not even a little," Mia shot back, though her tone was less confident than she'd intended. Clara, however, felt a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. As they rounded the final bend, the cove came into view. It was stunning. Pristine sand framed by jagged cliffs, the waves sparkling under the late afternoon sun. But there was something off about it. The shadows of the cliffs seemed too long, the water darker than it should have been. "Let's set up camp," Clara said, trying to shake off the feeling. "We've got a long night ahead." By sunset, the tents were pitched and a fire crackled in the center of their makeshift campsite. The group sat in a circle, roasting marshmallows and sharing ghost stories. As the sky darkened, the conversation turned to the legend of the drowned ones. "The story goes," Sam began, "that a ship sank off the coast centuries ago. The crew tried to swim to shore, but the sea was too rough. They drowned, cursing the waters as they went under. Now they're stuck here, looking for people to join them." "Why would they stay here?" Jake asked, tossing a stick into the fire. "Because they're bound to the place where they died," Mia explained. "Their spirits can't move on, or so the legend says." "It's all nonsense," Clara said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Just a story to keep people from swimming near the rocks." But as the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of decay, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. That night, Clara woke to the sound of whispering. She sat up, heart pounding, and looked around the tent. Jake was sound asleep beside her, snoring softly. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of voices rising and falling in an eerie melody. Clara unzipped the tent and stepped outside. The fire had burned down to embers, and the beach was bathed in pale moonlight. The whispering seemed to come from the water, where faint figures moved just beyond the surf. "Hello?" Clara called out, her voice trembling. The figures froze. For a moment, all was silent. Then one of them stepped forward, its form shimmering like a mirage. It raised an arm, pointing directly at Clara. She stumbled backward, tripping over a log and landing hard in the sand. When she looked up, the figures were gone. The next morning, Clara told the group what she'd seen. Mia dismissed it as a bad dream, and Jake joked about her overactive imagination. But Sam and Leo seemed uneasy. "I thought I heard something last night too," Sam admitted, "like voices." "Probably the wind," Leo said quickly, though his hands fidgeted with the straps of his backpack. Determined to prove that nothing was amiss, Jake suggested they explore the tide pools near the cliffs. The group reluctantly agreed, but as they walked along the shore, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. When they reached the tide pools, Mia pointed out something strange. The rocks were covered in carvings, symbols and shapes that looked like they belonged in an ancient language. At the center of one pool was a small, weathered statue of a woman with her arms outstretched, as if beckoning someone closer. "This is creepy," Mia said, taking a step back. "Let's go." But Jake was transfixed. "It's just a statue," he said, reaching out to touch it. As his fingers brushed the stone, the water around the statue began to churn. Clara grabbed his arm, pulling him away. "We're leaving. Now." That night, the whispers returned. This time they were louder, more insistent. Clara woke to find Jake standing at the edge of the water, staring out at the sea. "Jake?" she called, her voice trembling. He turned to her, his eyes glassy. "They want me to come," he said. "They need help." Clara ran to him, shaking him out of his trance. But as she led him back to the campsite, she saw them again. The figures in the water, watching, waiting. The next morning, Jake had no memory of what had happened, but the others began experiencing strange occurrences. Mia heard her name whispered in the wind. Sam's flashlight flickered, revealing shadowy shapes that vanished when he turned around. And Leo found handprints in the sand around his tent, though no one had been near him. Desperate to end the nightmare, Clara convinced the group to leave. But as they packed their things, the wind picked up and the waves grew higher. The whispers turned into wails, and the figures emerged from the water, their forms twisted and grotesque. The group ran, but the beach seemed endless. No matter how far they went, they couldn't escape the figures. One by one, the friends were dragged into the surf, their screams swallowed by the ocean. Clara was the last to fall. As cold hands pulled her under, she saw their faces, pale, bloated, and full of despair. The drowned ones. Weeks later, a fisherman found an abandoned campsite near Raven's Cove. The tents were torn, the fire long cold. Among the ruins was a notebook, its pages filled with frantic warnings. "Stay away. They're in the water. They're waiting." But by then it was too late. The drowned ones had found new voices to join their eternal song. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway. The small coastal town of Sandhaven was known for its pristine beaches, turquoise waters, and untouched beauty. Tourists often described it as paradise on earth. But like all paradises, Sandhaven had its secrets, ones buried deep beneath the waves, waiting for the right moment to resurface. For 4 college friends, Emma, Lucas, Mia, and Ryan, their trip to Sandhaven started like any other vacation. They'd planned a week of relaxation, bonfires, and late-night swims. None of them could have anticipated the horrors that would unfold when they ventured too close to the infamous Devil's Reef, a stretch of jagged rocks just off the coast. Locals avoided it, calling it cursed, but the friends dismissed the warnings as mere superstition. Their first night in Sandhaven was filled with laughter and the soothing sound of crashing waves. By the end of the week, however, the beach would be silent, save for the whispers of those who never left. The group arrived in Sandhaven on a sunny afternoon. The town was picturesque, with quaint cottages, vibrant fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, and a seemingly endless stretch of golden sand. Their rented beach house sat on a secluded cove, far from the bustling tourist areas. "This place is amazing," Mia said, stepping out onto the deck that overlooked the ocean. "I can't believe we got it for so cheap." "Probably because it's so isolated," Lucas replied, unloading their bags from the car. "But hey, more privacy for us." Emma, always the cautious one, glanced around. "Doesn't it feel a little too quiet, though? Like, unnatural?" Ryan rolled his eyes. "Relax, Em, not everything is a horror movie." Unbeknownst to them, a lone fisherman watched from the cliffs above. His weathered face was grim, and he muttered under his breath, "Fools, they never listen." The first 2 days were uneventful. The group spent their time swimming, sunbathing, and exploring the shoreline. On the 3rd day, they decided to venture into town for supplies. At the local market, an elderly woman approached them. Her eyes were cloudy with cataracts, but her voice was sharp. "You kids staying near Devil's Reef?" Lucas hesitated. Yeah. Why?" The woman's expression darkened. "Stay away from the reef. Bad things happen there. The kind of bad that doesn't let you leave." Emma's curiosity was piqued. "What kind of bad things?" The woman leaned in closer. "They say the reef calls to people, draws them in, and once you go, you don't come back." Ryan chuckled nervously. "Sounds like a ghost story." "It's not a story," the woman snapped. "People have disappeared, tourists like you, and the ones who return, they're not the same." The group left the market with a lingering sense of unease, but Ryan dismissed the warning as nonsense. "Old towns like this always have weird legends," he said. "Let's just enjoy the beach." That night, the group built a bonfire on the beach. The stars were bright, and the sound of waves filled the air. As the fire crackled, Lucas suggested a late-night swim. "Are you serious?" Emma asked. "It's freezing. Come on, it'll be fun," Lucas said, already stripping down to his swim trunks. Ryan and Mia followed suit, leaving Emma reluctantly joining them. The water was colder than expected, and the moonlight cast an eerie glow over the waves. As they splashed around, Mia froze. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "Hear what?" Lucas replied. "It sounded like whispering," Mia said, her voice trembling. Ryan laughed. "It's probably just the wind." But Emma heard it too, a faint melodic whispering as if the ocean itself was speaking. She turned to look toward the reef and saw something, a shadowy figure standing on the rocks, watching them. When she blinked, it was gone. "We should get out of the water," Emma said, her voice firm. The next morning, Ryan suggested they check out the reef. "It's low tide," he said. "Perfect time to explore." Despite Emma's protests, the group made their way to Devil's Reef. The rocks were slick with algae, and the air smelled of salt and decay. As they climbed, they found strange carvings etched into the stone, symbols and runes that none of them recognized. "What do you think they mean?" Lucas asked. "Nothing good," Emma replied. Near the edge of the reef, they found a tidal pool filled with shimmering water. It was unnaturally clear, and something about it felt wrong. "Dare you to dive in," Ryan said to Lucas. Lucas grinned. "You're on." Before anyone could stop him, Lucas dove into the pool. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the water began to churn violently. Lucas surfaced, gasping for air, but his eyes were wide with terror. "Something's down there," he screamed. The group pulled him out, but Lucas wouldn't stop shaking. "Eyes," he whispered. "So many eyes watching me." After the incident at the reef, Lucas's condition worsened. He became withdrawn, barely speaking, and often stared blankly into space. At night, he muttered in his sleep, his words unintelligible but filled with fear. Meanwhile, the house itself seemed to change. Shadows moved where there shouldn't be any. Doors creaked open on their own, and the sound of whispering grew louder, more insistent. One night, Mia woke up to find Lucas standing at the edge of the water, staring out at the reef. When she called his name, he turned to her, but his eyes weren't his own. They were black, empty voids. "It's calling me," he said. "I have to go." Desperate to break whatever curse had befallen them, the group returned to the reef, hoping to find answers. The symbols on the rocks seemed to glow faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "This was a mistake," Emma said. "We need to leave." But it was too late. The water around the reef began to rise, forming tendrils that reached for them. A deafening roar filled the air as a massive, shadowy figure emerged from the ocean. Its form was indistinct, but its glowing eyes bore into them. One by one, the friends were pulled into the water. Emma was the last, fighting with every ounce of strength she had. As she was dragged beneath the waves, she saw the truth. The reef wasn't just cursed. It was alive, feeding on those who dared to disturb it. Weeks later, a new group of tourists arrived in Sandhaven, eager to explore its untouched beauty. As they walked along the beach, they noticed a peculiar sight, a weathered journal washed up on the shore. Inside were the frantic writings of Emma Marks, warning anyone who read them. The island of Marlowe's Haven was a hidden gem, an unspoiled paradise known only to a few adventurous souls. Every summer, tourists flocked to its pristine beaches and turquoise waters, but few stayed past sunset. Locals warned that the nights belonged to the sea and the secrets it held. Visitors laughed off the superstitions, calling them quaint folklore meant to spook outsiders, until someone vanished. This summer, the island was hosting its biggest event yet, the annual Marlowe Beach Festival. Among the attendees were college friends Emily, Nate, Rachel, and Kevin, who had planned their trip as a last hurrah before graduation. They arrived ready for sun, sand, and celebration. But by the end of the festival, they would uncover the island's darkest secret. The festival was everything they had hoped for. Stalls lined the beach, offering fresh seafood, vibrant crafts, and colorful drinks served in hollowed-out coconuts. Music played from a makeshift stage where local bands performed under strings of twinkling lights. Emily, Nate, Rachel, and Kevin wandered through the festivities, soaking in the lively atmosphere. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the mood shifted. The laughter and music continued, but the air grew heavy. A warm breeze carried the faint scent of brine and something else, something metallic and sour. Emily noticed the locals glancing nervously at the water, their smiles faltering. "What's with the long faces?" Kevin joked, nudging an older man selling hand-carved necklaces. The man's expression darkened. "Stay close to the fire tonight," he said, his voice low, "and don't go near the water." Emily frowned. "Why not?" "The ocean isn't always kind," he replied cryptically before turning away. Later that night, the group gathered near the bonfire, sipping drinks and sharing stories with other festival-goers. Kevin, ever the daredevil, decided to spice things up. "All right, how about a little adventure?" he said, standing and gesturing toward the water. "Let's go for a swim." "Are you crazy?" Rachel hissed. "Didn't you hear what that guy said? What, the spooky warning?" Kevin laughed. "It's just a bunch of superstitious nonsense. Come on, it'll be fun." Nate and Emily exchanged uneasy glances, but Kevin was already running toward the shore. With a reluctant sigh, Nate followed. Emily hesitated before trailing after them, leaving Rachel alone by the fire. The water was colder than expected, and the waves seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. Emily waded in cautiously, her feet sinking into the silty bottom. Kevin splashed ahead, laughing and shouting, while Nate floated nearby, staring at the stars. Emily tried to relax, but a sudden tug at her ankle made her yelp. "What's wrong?" Nate called. "Something grabbed me," Emily said, her voice shaky. "Probably just seaweed," Kevin said dismissively. "Don't be such a—" Before he could finish, he was pulled under. For a moment, there was silence. Then Kevin burst to the surface, coughing and thrashing. "Something's down there," he gasped, scrambling toward the shore. The others followed, their fear outweighing their curiosity. They collapsed onto the sand, panting and shivering. Rachel ran over, her face pale. "What happened?" "I don't know," Kevin said, his voice trembling, "but it felt human." Emily glanced back at the water, now eerily calm. She thought she saw something, a pale face just beneath the surface, but when she blinked, it was gone. The group returned to their tent, but sleep didn't come easily. Kevin's bravado had vanished, replaced by a nervous energy that made him jump at every sound. Nate suggested they leave in the morning, but Emily wasn't so sure. She needed answers. The next day, she approached one of the locals, an elderly woman selling shells. "What's out there?" Emily asked, gesturing to the ocean. The woman's eyes narrowed. "You saw them, didn't you?" "Saw who?" "The Whispers," she said. "They're the souls of sailors from the Abyssal Queen." Emily frowned. "What's the Abyssal Queen?" the woman sighed. "A ship that sank 100 years ago. The crew was lost, but their spirits linger. They pull the living into the depths, desperate for company." Emily's stomach churned. "Why hasn't anyone done anything?" "You can't fight the sea," the woman said. "But if you want to survive, you'll need to leave before nightfall." Emily rushed back to the group, urging them to pack up and leave, but Kevin refused. "We're not running from some stupid ghost story," he said, his tone defiant. That night, the whispers began. Faint at first, like the rustle of leaves, but growing louder until they filled the air. The group huddled in their tent, terrified. Then the tent collapsed. They scrambled out, only to find themselves surrounded by figures rising from the sand. Their forearms were distorted, their eyes empty voids. The whispers reached for them, their fingers cold and wet. Kevin screamed as one of the figures dragged him toward the water. Emily grabbed his arm, pulling with all her strength, but the figure was stronger. One by one, the others were taken, their cries silenced by the waves. Emily was the last. As the figures closed in, she remembered the old woman's words. "You can't fight the sea." With a final scream, she was pulled under. Days later, a search party found their campsite, abandoned and eerily pristine. The locals shook their heads, muttering about the whispers and the folly of ignoring the ocean's warnings. Thank you for watching. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to leave a like and share it with others who love a good scare. Make sure to subscribe to Han Untold and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next creepy tale. Your support helps us keep uncovering the darkest and most haunting stories. Have a story you'd like us to cover? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the scariest things are closer than you think. Sweet dreams.